Hi, my name is Valerie Varan. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I'm an experiencer coach, and I'm author of the book Living in a Quantum Reality, using quantum physics and psychology to embrace your higher consciousness. With me today is Canem, and I am so excited to have you here today, Canem. I'm going to
Hi.
read a little bit about you for our viewers. So Canem is the creator and host of Kotodama Podcast. Kotodama, that's a mouthful, podcast, a podcast dedicated to exploring spiritual, metaphysical, and psychological themes right up my alley. Through meaningful conversations with a bunch of extraordinary guests. And throughout her life, she has had profound spiritual and mystical experiences that have deeply shaped who she is and the path she walks today, which is exactly why I am excited to have our conversation today. So, alongside her work as a podcast host, she is an intuitive psychic and will be offering her services in the near future. So, hi, Jana.
Yes. Hi, Valerie. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we start with you sharing some of these spiritual and mystical experiences that you've had, and especially like how young you were, and maybe a lot about the variety of experiences.
Yes, I mean, there's so much to go into. I guess since I was a child, I had kind of mystical experiences and also philosophical, spiritual thoughts. I don't know how else to describe them, but kind of thoughts of like, you know, why are we here? Is existence, does existence also mean non-existence at the same time? I mean, these are the kind of thoughts I had as an 8 or 7 year old or something. So I was always, yeah, on that kind of,
We would have
um,
been such great friends.
yes, we would have. Absolutely. I also had some poltergeist, I guess, or telekinesis experiences without not knowing still which one it was there, because apparently a lot of poltergeists are just psychokinesis from the people involved, which I find really fascinating.
Yes.
Um, yeah, and I also had a lot of, I guess, more so intuitive, not just an experiences of synchronicity and feeling I guess you could say, feeling my guides with me and making decisions from a heart place since I was small. And then I think I got into meditation. Somehow I found out what meditation is when I was in my teen, maybe 14 or something. I think I was 14 when I first meditated and had some experiences there with, I would say the beginnings of getting out of your body. I wasn't fully out of body yet when I was 14, but I kind of felt like, oh, this is crazy. I feel my body is vibrating and this other, it's like for everyone who does OBEs, they know what I'm talking about. But so yeah, my
Yes.
whole life kind of was like that. Yeah. And then at 22, I would say at 22 years old, when I was in Japan, which I'm also now, I had my first real spiritual awakening after a deep spirit guide meditation, or I did something like that. And I woke up the next day at exactly 11:11. And that's when it all started to really like, and now that's like 12 years ago or 10 years ago now. So yeah, then a lot more happened. And obviously, the more conscious it got, the more experiences I had. And then, yeah, so there's a lot we can go into there.
Well, there are. Oh, why don't you take a few of those and really share the depth of them, especially the ones that affected you the most profoundly?
Well, there's many. I could, for example, also talk about my dreams. So I'm quite psychic when it comes to my dreams as well. I have premonitions sometimes. I work with people in my dreams. So I believe dreams are we are in another multidimensional, different kind of reality that is as real as this reality. But I think most people just are not as aware of it. So I like to work on people in my dreams, literally. So I'm kind of a healer in the dream realm or in the astral realm. That's also why I wake up sometimes after like 8 hours of sleep, still exhausted, and I have, souls coming to me asking me for help. It's almost like it's also, for example, if I have questions about something and I wonder, because I'm kind of like you, I want to know more about this stuff. I talk with people. So obviously, I get constantly activated by my amazing guests and other people in my life. And questions arise and they always get answered in my dreams. Almost within 24 hours, I get an answer of something I was wondering about, or even something I wasn't too pressed about, but it was kind of like a thought, like, I wonder what this is. And then lo and behold, it will be in my dreams. It will be revealed to me, and it's almost like a knowing. I don't have normal dreams. I mean, my dreams are, I don't know what it is. As I said, it's in a different realm. I'm doing some things. I'm, downloading these answers. Also, for example, the death of my grandfather. So me and my grandfather had a great relationship, and before he even got sick, I mean, this man was quite, healthy, and he was doing well, even though he was a smoker, but he was, he was doing well. And almost like a year or months and months in advance, his spirit visited me in my dream over and over again. I would say like 5, 6, 7 times over the span of weeks, and told me that it was time for him to go soon. So I kind of knew that he was going to pass, but I couldn't tell anyone because I didn't want to freak out anyone. And he wasn't even sick. He wasn't even in the hospital yet. So then, with the coming months, of course, there was then, he did get more sick, of old age as well. And then when he passed, although it was very difficult, and everyone who has grieved before knows that, but I found it just so beautiful how his death, like, I mean, his soul um, kind of helped me to process my first real grievance because I've never grieved before. I have had people pass on, but I've never loved them as much as I did him. So his soul kind of eased me into my first grief experience. And then afterwards, I'm also kind of, I guess you could call me medium too. I can communicate with dead people if I want to. So I wanted to communicate with him, and I communicate with him from time to time, now less than at the time he passed. But I had a lot of, you know, experiences with him as well after his death. So, for example, that's an example. I don't know if that's
Beautiful. Well, and it's a great example of not only after death communication, but pre-death communication.
yes, yeah, it is. So, I really think that, and again, I'm much more in tune with my intuition than I used to be. And I'm much more, I do tarot card readings as well. It's one of the services I would like to offer in the future, but in the soon future, I guess. But, I feel like the cards are just a medium. We all have this within us. We all come with this, right? I've had one of my amazing guests tell me that, it's almost like learning how to walk. Of course, if your body is healthy, right? Like we all
Yeah.
have the capacity to walk, but we still have to kind of learn it a bit. And in our society nowadays, of course, in the Western or even here in Japan, Eastern, but kind of Western world, we don't really learn about these things anymore. So I love, talking to people like yourself who have been on this path, and we need to find each other as well, because as you know, in the psychological field as well, people can call you crazy, people might not believe you, and we need to kind of help each other out, right? To validate each other with these experiences.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. And so, speaking of that, right, here you were at this young age having all these experiences. Did you ever run into challenges? Did you ever run into people who maybe you started to share something and they had one of those kind of negative reactions and it kind of, blocked you or made you hide anything? Or how would you speak to that?
I think yeah, I come also from the academic world. I mean, I have a master's degree and a bachelor's degree. So when you're in the academic world, as you know, Valerie, more than anyone else, there's always these skeptics and these people who, think you're a bit crazy. But I've never had anyone like outright be very rude. I don't, but maybe I did, but I don't remember. But even my friends who didn't really, I guess, were not on the same wavelength as much, they still were very kind to me. And I think I didn't really need other people to validate these things for me. I kind of always felt in my heart, well, whatever my experiences is valid. So whether my own mother, I mean, my mother always believed me, but let's say it was a difference because she's actually quite spiritual, which might also have helped. But, my father, for example, he's actually less spiritual. I mean, he's still spiritual, but, more of a skeptic, and he laughs things off, and he's like, oh, you guys, whatever. Are you sure that's a spiritual inkling? Um, but yeah, I just kind of take it also with humor. Like I don't take that stuff too seriously. I think people are very brainwashed and very much disconnected from their senses, from their intuition, and from their spiritual side. So, but I did have negative experiences in the sense of like I've had a dark night of the soul. I've had my own challenges in life that really, really brought me close to, I guess, a darker, outcome. of the many life paths that we have. So I did yeah, ha had a problematic or not problematic, what do you say? I mean, just a painful past as well. And healing and pain. I mean, I would say pain and suffering have been one of the most important catalysts on my spiritual journey. So even though I was always spiritual, and I'm sure you maybe understand this as well, that when you really come on, to when these experiences happen where it's so much pain and so much suffering, you have to look within. But at the same time, the looking within is the painful part. It's almost like you are scared because we're in this society, right? We're always trained to, numb the pain with pills, numb the experience down, just get away from the pain, seeking the pleasure, avoiding the pain. It's almost like you are always taught coping mechanisms by your doctors, by your therapists as well sometimes. I find so it was, yeah, for me I did the opposite. So I went into deep into shamanic work deep within myself, and that's actually when it all elevated even more. So once I healed and integrated my inner child, my own trauma, you could say past trauma as well, but I kind of tend to focus on this life because I think it's all the same. So whether it's from a past life or from a future life, I think the access point is also here and now. So whether, I heal something from me being 5 years old, I still at the same time heal all of my ancestry and me in a parallel life or past life. That's my belief. So that's kind of what I did. And the more I integrated, the more, of course, of a clear, I guess, channel or a clear, intuitive I became, which is that's the funny thing about it. You become actually more spiritual the more you heal. It's not like, a lot of the mainstream psychology might think you're crazy, but actually the more you heal, the more these experiences actually happen. Like it's really funny.
No, I completely understand that. And it makes sense to me because, like you said, if you start understanding how we are as energy beings, and I won't say much here because I think we'll get into it in a little bit, but when we really appreciate how we are at an energy level, and then if we really appreciate that there's a quantum dimension to us that kind of is beyond space-time rules, then we start to begin to understand what you just said. And even in regular psychology, I notice that the real healing happens when we can go into more somatic types of work. Like you said, it's not about escaping the pain, it's about entering the pain fully and deeply and knowing how and understanding that as we do, it dissipates faster. So the fastest way is through, right?
Yes.
Now, I'd love to touch on Dark Night of the Soul too, because a lot of people
Yes.
don't understand what that is. And I don't think we have I haven't seen any research, quite frankly, on Dark Night of the Soul in the psychology domain or even in the, psi research domain. But I remember when I went through my first couple of episodes that I recognized were something, but I didn't know really what they were. And I remember finding St. John of the Cross, 16th century prose, not an easy read, but essentially, John of the Cross wants us to know that there's two types of dark night of the soul. So I'm going to describe them for viewers so that people can understand that there might actually be two types. And the type we're having kind of indicates where we are along our spiritual path. So the first one, for example, he called dark night, little d, little n. And it was a time when things that interested us no longer interest us. We used to be passionate about those things, but we're not. Now, notice how that sounds like depression, right? Regular kind of psychological depression, the way our field of psychology sees it today. But isn't it interesting to hear Dark John of the Cross's version, where he's going to say, no, what's happening is someone's starting to be in the beginning of their spiritual journey. And what's happening is, the being that they were, and therefore their interests and who they are and their values, they're being shaped. So early on, the old is falling away, but they don't yet know the new that is coming on board. And then eventually they go through that path. Now, dark night of the soul, capital D and capital N, he said, actually is what comes to people who are well along their journey. And he said that essentially it's almost like in the beginning, I kind of liken it to training wheels on a bike, in other words. Like, in the beginning, we need training wheels. And so if we're on the early part of our journey, maybe we kind of feel our sense of spiritual presence a little bit more. Maybe we're getting a lot of beginner luck help and assistance and communication. And then all of a sudden it disappears. So it feels like you've just been dropped off on a dark desert. And all of a sudden, this spiritual presence that you've felt that has been guiding you along probably many lifetimes is all of a sudden gone. You can't feel it at all. And you mentioned grief, right? The grief that comes from once having experienced the wholeness of spiritual presence and then having it evaporate and you can't feel it can set people into huge panic. I remember when it happened to me, it was the universe basically had kicked me out of the environmental engineering field and told me to go into the field of psychology. I kind of went kicking and screaming, so to speak. It's a longer version of that story, but I finally was surrendering, but I wasn't surrendering real peacefully about it. I really didn't want to go into the field of psychology because, as you know, it's, especially back then, it's again, it's very materialist minded, so it's not very conducive for those of us along these spiritual domains, and so it was a difficult thing. But it all of a sudden in grad school, it was like spirit had completely withdrawn. So what was your dark night like? And do
Well,
you recognize in this lifetime, did you go through both?
yes, I did actually. Yeah, actually, I would say the first one sounds more like what I had at 22, my first awakening, and realizing, I want to fully devote my life more to these things. That's also when I got into quantum physics, and we can also talk about that. But then
Yeah.
it's 27, 28. That's when I had I guess 27. That's when I, the 27 Club. Not many people, live past 27, right? In the celebrity culture, because apparently it's, whatever. I don't know how much I can say on YouTube, but basically it's when the Saturn return, and for all the astrologers, they know what that means, right? The big, your life falls apart almost. I mean, for me, it was very, very intense suffering. I mean, I know I could have not been alive today. And
Wow.
yeah, and I would say, yes, my spiritual, it was almost like the way you described it is so interesting. I've never heard anyone describe it this way, and I love it because I, I think that my spirit guides, I guess, couldn't get through because other energies were coming through more strongly. And this is why healing is so important, right? Because when we don't take care of ourselves and our psyche and our nervous system, and grounding was, I couldn't ground, right? And so when you, I guess you could say, energy healers could say that there was almost like these holes in my auric field where other entities can attach and they can drain you. And, and a lot of these mental disorders go also together with spirituality. I think at one point we will combine them both, and people like you are so important on this on this journey, right? That where we can see, yes, it might be anxiety, depression, whatever you want to say, but also there's a spiritual component to it. There are entity attachments and whatnot. So yeah, I was going through the worst pain of my life. I still have not. I mean, everything else after that, once I overcame that, I was like, I can do anything in life. Nothing is worse than losing yourself within yourself. I kind of like losing your mind, I could say, is the best way of describing it. Completely no grounding, no nervous system regulation, all of these, at that time, actually, I didn't go to a therapist. Much later, when I was actually in a better space, that's when I actually went to therapy. But I guess if I would have gone, they would have probably given me a lot of these titles, of all these, disorders that there are. And I can actually attest to you can heal all of these because I did. So I had symptoms before that now I don't have anymore. I mean,
Well, let's
you know,
face it, we're the only ones that ever heal ourselves, right? I mean, even
exactly.
physically. So, to your point, um,
Absolutely.
what made you not? Yeah, I mean, you even said that it was so deep that you might not have been alive today. So,
Yeah.
what made you not, right? I can think of 1,000 reasons, but what made you
Mm.
not reach out to a therapist earlier? And then what made you reach out later?
I knew that I wasn't safe in the mental health field. I just knew. I
Wow.
just knew. And at the time I was in London and I just knew they would never understand. I knew they would put a label on me. And that might have been accurate at the time. Nothing against the label. I mean, I guess you have to label to kind of categorize people at some way, but I just knew it would not have ended well. I just had an inkling. I had a feeling. It was also during was it during COVID? 5, 6 years ago, I think. Yeah, that makes sense. 26, 27. Yeah, I believe it was during that time as well, where a lot of people were having mental health issues anyway. So I think it triggered a lot of people, and it was probably full anyways. But um, I think I just knew it wasn't safe. That's kind of how I also at this point, right now, I'm in much a better place, and I feel I'm actually in much more bliss and like health now than most people I meet in my life. But now, even now, I'm careful about the time and place that I talk about these experiences, right? I mean, I can
Yes.
still I can take it if people think, what we say, what we talk about is crazy, but it's still not a nice feeling. It still doesn't mean you have to go and open up to everyone. And I actually think that's part of the boundaries as well. I do not recommend this though. I think if anyone else would have been in the situation and anyone is listening who is in that situation right now, I mean, seek out help, but be also smart about what you say to these people and in the mental health field because honestly, I have three best friends kind of very close to me who are all in the therapy psychological field. I basically have therapists as friends, so maybe also that's why I didn't really need it. But um, you cannot, I don't think you can openly talk about a lot of these things that we experience. And I don't think
I
it's
mean,
safe.
it's sad but true, right? We always have to discern, and I always tell my clients that we really do have to discern to whom we're saying what and which kinds of things that we're sharing. And just for our viewers, since we're on that part of the topic, a quick shout out to the many people who are specializing in this field, right? So um, usually you can find it under the title of transpersonal psychology, transpersonal psychotherapy, because at least they um, appreciate the spiritual dimension and they realize spiritual experiences and they bring that in. They may not be hugely specialized in maybe some of the things you and I have talked about, but at the same time, they're not, they're going to understand spiritual experiences a bit more and understand the difference between a spiritual crisis and spiritual experience. As really differentiating out spiritual emergency, like not the same thing. Any of that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I guess that's kind of what I just described. That's kind of how I felt. But I love how you talk about it. Yeah, I guess there are people now you can reach out to. But actually, I did reach out to some spiritual healers. I did actually work with some spiritual healers who were well versed in the mental health field. They were not, some of them actually, I think maybe she is actually a trained therapist. I'm not even sure, but she was a full-on shamanic healer and she kind of knew what she was doing, and that kind of helped me. So I did a few sessions with this woman. Um,
Any of that you'd mind sharing? What that was like for viewers who have no idea what shamanic healing is and what that would be like? Anything you can share?
yeah, so I think there's many ways of doing this. The thing I do is called shamanic soul retrieval. So I think there's a lot of, I mean, you guys can Google and look up. I think there's many people who do it. It's kind of like going back in time to your childhood trauma, to the root cause of the pain. So instead of saying, I feel triggered right now here in this moment in my living room as a 30-year-old. Now it's like, you go back, you kind of ask yourself where it comes from, and you go back to that root cause. And I think every shamanic healer does it differently. And now I'm very intuitive and I kind of have my own way of doing it. But essentially is a little bit like in psychological terms, inner child healing mixed with time travel, if we look at the quantum realm of it all, because time is not linear. So you actually have the capacity as a human to time travel. What does this mean? You can actually change your past. And actually, in ancient wisdom, people know this. I think a lot of shamans know this, because, the future is not really real and the past is not really real. What it is a concept that we have of now, of the future, and now of the past. So it is actually possible to go back in time to yourself as a 4-year-old and remember something that brought you pain. That's what trauma is. I don't mean incredible, traumatic, war. It doesn't have to be, it can be, let's say, war trauma, or people that, what people in society and mainstream call trauma, but more so anything that is painful and unresolved. That's what I would say trauma is. So you kind of go back to that um, point in time, you feel the emotions, you validate yourself, you change the past, you change the scene. I think in some therapeutic psychological, I think they have similar things as well. So you kind of just make it so your inner child now is happy. So it doesn't, there's no rule to it really, because I'm an intuitive healer for myself as well. And actually, I work with some of my friends too sometimes where I heal them, but you kind of do it intuitively and feel into the inner child because that child, that 4-year-old Canem, for example, is still there. If I have not rescued her from that situation, she's still there, right? So people don't understand, and parts of your soul get stuck there. That's what soul retrieving is. So once you integrate that trauma, once you feel it, you said it earlier, Valerie, which is genius. That's this thing of like the only way, what is it? Only way
The
out.
fastest way is through. Yeah.
Exactly. The only way out is in or something or through. That's exactly what it is. So you feel the emotions. It's very painful, but at least now you consciously feel it and you give yourself the space and the time. And then you integrate this experience. So you take that inner child, you do that integration. And I think there's many people who maybe teach this. So I hope everyone can, find something out there that works for them. But what that does is it resolves the root issue. So now let's say I'm 25. I don't get triggered anymore by the thing that used to trigger me. Maybe it's a word that someone says. Maybe, triggers can be anything. It
Yes.
can be literally a piece of croissant. I don't know what would trigger
Yes.
someone. I have no idea, and everything is valid. So now it doesn't. But why doesn't it trigger any? Well, because it never happened in my timeline. Quantum physically, we could say it that way, or we could say in a more healing way, because I've resolved the issue. Now it is not there in me. The ripple effects of the trauma have been stopped. Also, that part of the soul came back to me, disintegrated. So now, for everyone who's interested in being more psychic and intuitive, what is happening now is that I'm so much more here. My life force energy is back. A part of me, for example, I have a specific crib trauma. By the way, for everyone who's a mother or father who's listening, babies have no concept of time. Leaving your baby in a crib crying for 5 or 10 minutes can be intensely traumatizing for a baby. I don't know if anyone needed to hear that. So when you take these life force back and integrate these, parts of your soul back, you become more whole. You become more like the person you were meant to be, almost like your inner child again, but in a much more, integrated, beautiful way. And what happens is I come sometimes out of these intense healing sessions. Now I don't, again, now it's not an emergency anymore. Now I do it whenever I feel a bit of unease. But,
Mhm.
back in the day, it was intense. And sometimes it took me maybe just 30 minutes, sometimes maybe 2 hours. But I came out of these sessions, I kid you not, I could see more colors. I feel like my
Yes.
taste buds could feel again. Like I could taste more. I could see more. Again, I was more intuitive. All of a sudden, I got inklings. I could hear myself more. For everyone who's interested in, relationship and romance, men that I found, I mean, attractive before, then I was like, oh my goodness, how did I ever fall for this emotionally unavailable, you could say in psychological terms, like the emotional avoidant people, like, oh, now it's like giving me the ick. I can't do it anymore. So you kind of gravitate towards more healthy experiences in your life. This is the beauty of healing. I mean, I talk about this all the time. It's like everyone should do this, you know? And I think there's so many ways of healing. There's somatic therapy. And again, like incorporating the body is so important because we store emotions and trauma as well in the body and in the cells, literally. You can also talk to your body. That's another topic. But
Exactly.
um, yeah, does that make sense? So I kind of changed my whole life with this thing and you know,
Yes.
have healthier relationships now. I have healthier habits. And of course, I'm almost 32 now. So I still have a long way to go, and there's still things that need integrating. But overall, I would say my frequency is higher. I'm more happy. I have more joy. I have less pain in my life. And that's what it's all about. And I'm also more clear. So now when I channel, right, into these spiritual
Yes.
realms, or I want to channel for another person, it's clearer for me. I trust myself more. Self-trust and self-love also like go hand in hand, right? And we need to learn to trust
Absolutely.
ourselves. Yeah. So yeah, it's I hope that answers your question.
Oh, no, I love everything that you shared about that. And it makes me want to do two things at once. So, quick question, and then we'll go forward. But, about the part that you just shared, what came to mind is like, viewers are probably maybe not as informed about what we might mean by entity energy. And it's very easy to get entity attachments. It's not like possession in the movie.
Mhm,
And when you were talking about the clearer senses, clearer colors,
mhm.
just everything, it reminded me of that can be a sign that we removed entity energy, right?
Yes.
We're truly coming more fully into our own self rather
Yes.
than our having our self energies, right, at that energy quantum level, rather than having our self energies contaminated, polluted
Yes.
by entity energy. So I would like to go into quantum physics next, but is there
Hmm.
anything you might want to share with viewers first about
Hmm.
how to recognize entity energy and any thoughts you have it, and maybe I'll just precede this by saying I remember when I was at I think it was an ICENE conference way back when there used to be the International Society for the Study of Subtle Energy and Energy Medicine
Wow.
conference, and there would be these amazing physicists there and just all these worldwide professionals that just blew me away. And
Yeah.
one time there was a workshop and it was called Compassionate Depossession. I, as a therapist, of course, were planning to make sure I attended this compassionate depossession session. And it was being held by I think it was a psychologist who worked at a state mental hospital. And what he was trying to inform therapists of is how sometimes mental health diagnoses, like the pattern we're seeing that gives someone a diagnosis, in this case, this is a woman who had been diagnosed as bipolar disorder her entire life.
Mm.
And she was at the state hospital, and we actually watched, he had recorded these, so we got to watch these sessions that he shared and trained us with. And basically by the end of it, what we realized was is she looked like she was deeply in a hypnotic state, but she sounded like she was channeling, like a trance channel,
Yeah.
different entity energies. But
Mm.
really, most of them aren't what people would fear, aren't what people would think based on the movies. Because, for example, one turned out to be like a little boy on her street who he had
Yeah.
been killed when he was, I don't, it was like 2, 3, 4 years old, something young.
Yeah.
And I guess she was also a little girl on the street, but she looked
Mm.
nice and he decided she looked safe. And so he apparently
Mm.
went into her body.
Yeah.
Another one of the entities was her grandmother, who she had never met, but she had
Mm.
grown up in a very abusive um, family, unfortunately. And apparently, the grandmother revealed that when this little girl was born, she decided that she was on the other side, but she's like, maybe I can keep her safe if I go inside. And so
Oh.
then the grandmother apparently even attached her energy into this little girl's field. So there was only one entity out of the, I'm thinking there was four that got exorcised. Um,
Wow.
and one was a little dark, but it wasn't like that big of a deal. It was really a human who had been lost in the darkness and not gone onto the other side for so long that it had even forgotten it was human. But essentially, we watched as this man uh, called forth and was able to have conversations with these various entities and was able to encourage them to cross over into the light and then reveal, like clear her field. And amazingly, she was able to be released from the state hospital and she was no longer qualifying for bipolar disorder. And that's why he wanted to share this session with us as therapists.
Yeah,
He wanted us to see how sometimes these symptoms may not be ours. And
absolutely.
we therapists have all had clients who come in and say, I feel depressed, but I don't know why. It doesn't even feel logical. That's a great sign that we might have entity energy. So, anything about that
Yeah.
you might want to say?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I love that, the compassion of it all. This might not resonate with everyone, but I always I often say that demons are demonized. So what do I mean by that? It's like these energies. I mean, for me, demons are just, that's my own definition, and everyone has probably their own, but what it is, it's often just an energy that has forgotten that it is part of the light. So yes, it can be a passed away person. It can also be, something more dark. It can be more of a malevolent, male, male,
Yes, that malevolent.
malevolent. Thank you. English is like not my first language, so yeah, malevolent energy. It can be, it can actually be anything that is not for your highest good. But these entities, a lot of them, in my own feeling and in my own experience, they do not the, it's not like they are this hyper intelligent, they have the whole viewpoint of what they're doing there. It's kind of like a desperate energy and clinging to energy and wanting to feed off of you. So even when we talk about these more malevolent energies, they are still actually in a way they just forgot how to get their own energy basically. Okay, you can also call these vampiric energies, which by the way, humans are also vampire energies. I mean, vampires in a way. Like they can be energetic vampires, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
So there's a lot of these entities, but the way I kind of see it is we should not fear. First of all, because fear also brings on more and can be a
Yes.
match to more of these energies. But yes, I absolutely agree that in the mental health field, right? Like if you are depressed, if you are anxious, even if it comes from your own trauma, not like this girl, right, who had these attachments because of some sort of, still she had boundary issues. Because if she would have had strong boundaries in place and protection, she would not have been a match to these energies. So there's like different ways we can go here, right? Like for me as a shamanic healer, I'm like, let's heal you so that you get to a point. I I give myself as an example. I heal to such a degree to where I now am, first of all, such a high frequency that these entities cannot attach. Second of all, my boundaries are up. So I can literally say, no, this is not what
Yes.
I do not allow any of these energies, whether it be spiritual or physical. Everyone who's scared of
Yes.
these spiritual energies, I always say, like, it's literally like a toxic ex-boyfriend. It's not that deep and it's not that scary as you think it is. So I like to kind of release the fear there because I know how dangerous fear can also be. It's the
Yes.
fear in and of itself is actually the thing that feeds these energies. It's not your
Yes.
joy
Fear and
that feeds
anger.
them. Exactly. This is why the best thing you can do, in my own opinion, is to heal. Go maybe to an energy healer, right? Like a lot of energy healers also close these auric field, like these holes in your aura and stuff. But I believe when you heal the root cause, these holes in the aura practically do not exist anymore. So, and you get better with boundaries, right? So that's kind of all it is. It's kind of saying no to unhealthy situations, very similar to what we all know in social situations, right? And so both happens. You're not a match anymore to these entities, and also you're not a match anymore to kind of I would say, people in your life who just drain your energy and, do not give anything to you, and you become more joyful, which joy and bliss and love and authenticity and, all of these wonderful emotions that we all love feeling, they are literally toxic to these entities because they cannot get anything from that. It's on a different frequency scale. I'm sure someone else is more,
Yes.
better at explaining that. But yes, also thoughts are not really your own. So a lot of people do not know that the thoughts that they have in their own heads is not necessarily coming from them.
Right.
It's more like you're channeling thoughts. When you're at a party with like 50 other people, you might just pick up on someone else's thoughts. You might pick up on the thought of an entity who wants to trick you into believing that you're ugly and useless, for example, right?
Yes.
Those, yeah, and those thoughts can come from your childhood. They might also come from just a random entity that is floating around you, Um, so yeah, what can we do, It's I believe it's healing, and it's get your own fields up. Also, I do protection meditation as well, just because now I'm more in the public eye. We should all do that anyways, right? And so I think it's important as well to kind of protect yourself energetically, but at the same time, let's also look deeper and make sure that we don't feel the need for so much protection, because that's also, it means you feel unsafe, So that's kind of what I feel about that.
Well, and I love how you said it's not much different than that ex-boyfriend, because it's true, right? Just because, let's say, some dimensions of being are not visible to our eyes unless we're clairvoyant, um, that doesn't mean they don't exist. And so, like you said, that means they can talk to us, we can pick it up. Telepathy, Charles Tart, psychologist, had said, even way back in 2017, he said telepathy is one of the big five, along with precognition and clairvoyance, remote viewing, if you will. Also, PK, psychokinesis, he said was a big five, and psychic healing was a big five. And so, what did he mean by that? He said, there is so much evidence. This is so robustly studied that he doesn't know how every single therapist doesn't take as fact those skills. Like, that's how much evidence was around even in 2017 for that. And anyway, so like you said, it's I'm sure we could even have a whole nother conversation on this, but it's robust to think of these multidimensional realities, isn't it? And crossing timelines and what have you. So maybe let's go down to quantum physics a little bit. So I would love for you to tell me and viewers, what was the first group of experiences that you were having that made you say, oh, quantum physics, maybe I'll check that out? Like, can you explain how you went there?
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, it was at university again. I was 22 or 23. I was always around a lot of these guys. I had a lot of guy friends. I mean, girlfriends too, but a lot of guys, and they were into these, what is reality? Is everything a simulation? Kind of thing. And so I
Yes.
had some friends. I had a few friends who were really into the double slit experiment. Is time relative? What does that mean? Why does time accelerate the faster we are? What is the speed of light? Like all of these kind of, and also Einstein and Schrödinger's cat and things like that. And then and we were sitting in these, I don't know, bars or in these, cafes during when I was a student, and we would just like completely theorize philosophical, conversations about
Love it.
what the nature of reality are. It was so fun. And so I had a friend, yeah, I guess two or three friends who were really into this, and they told me a lot of this stuff. And then I came home completely mind blown, and I was like, I need to now research for myself. So that's when I researched the double slit experiment, the observer effect, the superposition. That's when I like got into that stuff and the quantum entanglement and everything. And at the same time, I also had my first spiritual awakening, my softer one, you could say, not the shamanic one, but this is when I was first like, realizing, wait, God is everything. I am part of source, And
Yeah.
so all of those things, my spiritual experiences, my meditations, my first out of body experiences as well around that time, they all aligned with these quantum physics, quantum physical theories. I was just like, this makes sense. Of course. We decide what it is. It's our free will, ultimately, that changes everything. So I don't know, somehow it all connected, it all made sense to me, and I was like, this is what physics is. Why was my physics teacher so boring? He could have completely made me into a scientist at that point. Like I was like, if I would have had the right person, right, like the right teacher, I could have gone into that realm as well, because I'm also a life path 7. Like I am a scientist in mind. Like I'm not skeptical, but I'm very like, I want to know. I'm so curious. Okay, why? I want to theorize as well. That's why I love people like you, Valerie, right? Like we love talking about these things. It's so
Love it.
fascinating. Yeah, and it kind of explains all these things that we've all felt as children, especially these spiritual people, right? Like it makes sense. Of course, there's parallel realities and multiple dimensions. That's all makes sense to me, right? Yeah, so yeah, that's
Ex-
how I got into that.
Oh, I love that. And so, in some ways, it sounds like all of the main topics, quantum non-locality, entanglement, superposition, multiple realities, parallel realities, if you will. Um, all of these terms were vocabularies that completely made sense to you when you were applying them to your own experience. Now, for viewers out there, I'll just say, I have a lot of other videos and other things that really get deeply into what each of these are. Maybe I'll just very briefly, kind of define it. Quantum non-locality is a big thing, right? Because let me first say what it's not. So there's non-locality and then there's locality. So, before, when we were discovering light and when we were discovering how light moves as waves, for example, and you could write it, oh, what? It's traveling at the speed of light? You mean it's a constant, as opposed to why does it look so slow, right? If it's separated into bandwidths from, red, like the rainbow colors, right? From red to violet, it looks like it's traveling at different speeds, if you will, but it's really about their oscillation speed, if you will. But in other words, they take time and space to travel. Now, with that, if all of a sudden something gets communicated instantaneously across the globe, that would violate that. And as these quantum physicists started really going into the nature of light and energies and forces, they started realizing that something was violating these local cause effects of the forces that they were studying. And that's when Einstein said, what spooky action at a distance? Like, what? But it has been proven over and over and over now, they don't really understand the how or the why, but the fact that we have non-locality and specifically entanglement. Entanglement is, let's say you have two photons of light, and let's say they're entangled and you put one in London and one in California, and I'll just use it playfully. If you tickle the one in London, the one in California will laugh at the exact same time. Now, the effect happens to be this complementary effect, if you will, and we don't have to get into details, but the fact that this effects seem to violate taking time and space to travel was really, really mind-blowing. And yet, again, it's been, shown. The other thing about quantum physics is essentially things are looked at as various states, and whatever the probable states are, they are seen to be existing all at the same time, and then that's what they call superposition. And then the observer effect that you mentioned was somehow when we measure, some people argue, are we observing or is it just measurement? And that's a long drawn out fight they're all having. But essentially, when we measure, for some reason it goes from multiple states at once, or the probability of being all these places, to a very specific place every single time. And they still don't know why. So it's also called the measurement problem. So, like you said, these things about violating time and space rules, the way consciousness acts, it does regularly violate time and space rules, especially for experiencers, right? So no wonder we have to go to quantum physics to start getting a vocabulary for us to use. And I love that this Stanford material scientist, his name, he's passed now, William Tiller, but he was one of my heroes because he was even saying, look, when you're starting to get into new fields, things are so fuzzy, you're going to have to borrow vocabulary. So yes, we're allowed to borrow these vocabularies to use, even though some people would highly criticize us. So when you think of these, how did it affect you the most? How did it, whether it helped you integrate something the most, or like, how did it help? What would you tell viewers and experiencers, like why they should even look into quantum physics?
I mean, yes. And first of all, I'm not a genius, okay? And later on, by the way, I forgot to say that. Later on in my life, I actually became randomly friends with quantum physicists. Like, this is how much I was attracting these people. Um, but they were all geniuses and they knew about all these, and whatnot. I'm not that kind of intelligence, but still, I could find like a something that resonated with me. So I want to really tell anyone who's listening that it's worth looking at this because it validated my experiences. It made life feel more magical. And it is. Life is so magical. Life is so magical, you know? And so finally, for the first time in any science, I was like, wait a minute. You're telling me that these geniuses like Einstein and Schrödinger were questioning reality and we're like, wait, if a, I don't know, tree falls in the forest and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound?
Yes.
We don't know, to be honest with you, because how could we know? So, life felt more magical and I felt really much, even though a lot of it was mind blowing, it was mind blowing. It was almost eerie and a bit creepy as well at the same time. Looking at, for example, the double slit experiment is quite creepy. And the more you think about it, it's almost like it is a bit of a shock as well, right? Like I think it could cause ontological shock in some people for sure. If that's even the right term, I don't know. But at the same time, I felt, yeah, validated and just kind of understood. And I felt like, wait, if these geniuses such as Einstein were, who was a religious man, and also Schrödinger had a spiritual background, I believe. I mean, look this up, everyone. Don't believe me because I'm not 100% sure, but I think Schrödinger had actually was a spiritual man as well. And these people were kind of spooked out by these experiences and kind of like, this is mysterious, it's mystical. This is interesting. What does this say about the nature of our reality? So does this mean there is no exoteric, right? Like everything must inherently come through us. So this is how I kind of I kind of bridged that then in my own mind and in my heart of like, okay, this is what quantum physics says, and they can only do it so much, right, with the experiments because they still think in physical terms. So there's only so much we can prove with this stuff because they still have to have a kind of have to adhere, I guess, to the physical laws like, gravity and, particles. But I think, looking at that and then looking at my own mystical experiences and, putting them together, it just all made sense to me. I was like, of course, I am the inherent me. My experience, first of all, is valid. Second of all, life is happening through me. I'm not here watching this laptop right now that I'm talking to you through, like, right, Valerie? Like, this is already cool, but like, it is like, it's not that I'm not, it's just out here and not connected to me. Life is happening through me, through my own eyes and my senses and my body and my physical and my spiritual body. So, whoever I say I am, I think I must be that person then. Who even is to say? So, if all of these geniuses for hundreds of years do not know what reality is, then Why would you believe any skeptics about that life is not magical? Life is absolutely magical, right? I mean, I don't know if this makes sense to anyone, but this is kind of how I make sense of it. And I'm just like, and there's like Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he talks about how to rewire your brain and how to have these transcendental meditations that obviously I also experienced, and some of your guests and yourself probably as well, realizing, wait, I can pick up things from the future. I can pick up things, I can time travel to the past in meditation. I can, change things right now. If I go as a healer and I integrate something as when I was, I don't know, 11, then now it also changes. I have proof of this in my own life. It just all makes sense to me. And it's so beautiful. Why wouldn't you be interested in that, right? But I understand everyone has a different, I love this stuff. So yeah, it's just validating and beautiful.
Oh, I love that. And one of the last things that you pointed out was the true implications for the field of psychotherapy, how profoundly it can affect psychotherapeutic tools that we can develop when we stop believing in materialism and space-time is just the only thing. I love that. And we aren't going to get that as long as we keep looking at ourselves as particles. And yet, even in classical physics, like you don't even have to go to quantum physics, even in classical physics, they too wanted to know what we were made of. So they kept going deeper, closer, the better the equipment got, the more they went. And the mystical, profound realization is that we're 99.999999% space. And in less than a proton volume of space, that's pretty small. In less than a proton volume of space, they calculate there is more energy than in all the material known universe. But it's funny because when they see this little speck, I think Neil deGrasse Tyson, if I am saying that his name correctly, but he used to have this Cosmos series, and he's more classical physicist, but he was standing in this cathedral, and he said, "See that little speck of dust floating in the sunbeam? That is how much matter compared to this cathedral of space." But mind-blowingly, when we look into what that little speck of dust is made of, it too is made of a cathedral of space to a speck of dust ratio of matter. And so no wonder the double slit experiment can really be profound when we start realizing that really everything has a wave nature. And what does that mean? And this thing we used to think were things and building blocks and hard, tangible things, we're finding that it's really not made of anything.
Yes.
It truly is energy. And so electromagnetically, we can speak to frequencies. At the quantum level, we can't really speak to frequency, so we're still lacking vocabulary of that. But like you said, we can see that maybe our physical beingness and our essence within is all energy carrying information in various geometries of form. And then when we go back to our little 4 and 5-year-old self and heal something, then in consciousness, it completely reverberates throughout the geometry that is our true essence. And that's why these things work. Like you said, whether we're reaching across time, it doesn't matter. I have a lot of clients who end up healing past life memory issues or future life memory. Like you said, like something will come in consciousness. And so maybe we can end by saying that consciousness is, we have to get to where we realize it's not being produced by the brain. And luckily, the leading edge consciousness researchers are moving away from neurocorrelates of consciousness, where they're just trying to figure out which parts of the brain light up during which conscious or lack of conscious experience. but they're moving towards realizing that the brain, but not only the brain, every neuron, every cell, every atom is really serving as an energy transducer, transmitter, antenna, right? It's picking up thoughts everywhere, not only from the person talking to you next to you, but from other dimensions as well. And no wonder people who have, spiritual experiences or near death experiences, they all say that communication is telepathic.
Yes.
So, like you said, whether it comes in our dreams or comes while we're conscious and awake, we can kind of consider that, like you said, if we all realize we have the potential, if we listen really closely and subtly, no wonder just about every spiritual tradition focuses on quieting the mind so that we can actually hear. And then, like you said, life is magical. So, any thoughts that you want to leave our viewers with before we end?
Yes, I think one of the most beautiful things that we should, yeah, that we could end on is that all of these things teach us how connected we are. We're all interconnected. We're all part of this thing. Whether you, even if you believe in a materialist universe, aren't we all still connected, right? And even if you're one of these people, right, who are more of a spiritual, esoteric worldview, we are all part of this big thing, this experience. There is no real disconnection. The disconnection, the separation is, in fact, in my opinion, an elaborate illusion. So once we understand that, again, as someone who loves healing, what I want to leave people with is when you change self, everything will change. And also, you will be you will be that beacon of light for other people. You cannot give out of an empty cup. Like literally, it's so cringe. It's maybe it's cringy and it's, everyone says that, but it's so true, right? The more we give to ourselves and really put things back together in ourselves, the more we can be that person for other people, even if without trying, right? Like I can be somewhere and just with my energy transmute someone, or just because of a kindness that comes natural to me because I don't have, as much fear anymore. So um, I think that's the most beautiful thing that we can learn. And life is magical. That's also, yeah.
Oh,
Thank
I
you.
love that, John. Thank you so much for being here today. And do you
Thank you.
want to tell viewers where to find you? And certainly I'll have it written.
Yes, so check out my podcast. I have a spiritual mystical podcast called the Kotodama Podcast. Kotodama, by the way, is a Japanese and it means, it's an ancient belief that words carry spirit and entities and that words shape reality. So that's kind of perfect.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's what my podcast is called. You can probably find it somewhere. Check it out. I have these amazing conversations with wonderful people. And yeah, thank you so much, Valerie, for having me on. This was so fun.
Thank you so much.